Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And we are we're missing Val today. This is probably going to happen more often that one of us is going to be out through the summer because life is slowly returning back to normal, and that means people are traveling more, which is all very exciting.
Yay.
And so Val's not here with us, but she's having a great time. I would like to say she's not here with us, but I'm sure she's thinking of us this morning, but I doubt it because she's having too much fun, which is fine. That's what she should be doing. So,
you know what? We need to just have just as much fun then.
We will definitely try, and we've got a doozy of a film to talk about to have a good time.
We really do.
It'll be an interesting conversation. It feels like it's been forever since we've actually sat down and recorded an episode, because it's been a couple of weeks since we did the live episode as part of RemoteCon, which we were glad to be part of as part of the Stolen Droids Network. But then, it's just been a while since we sat down and recorded. So it's good to be back, like recording and doing a regular show. So we'll see how this goes.
I was thinking that too. And in a couple of weeks when Val's back, we're planning on an in-person recording.
Yeah, it is time. We are all at the point with our vaccinations where we feel comfortable getting together, and there are venues that we can go to. And so, it'll be a lot of fun. We're still going to try to do video, so we'll keep the YouTube series going as well as the podcast audio stuff going, and it'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
It'll just be so much fun to just be in the same room together and doing this.
Yep. I've missed it. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to be out of practice. Like, I'm going to show up in like my pajama pants and like dressed up from here and like realize that I have to be out in public.
No judgment here, bud.
Yeah.
No judgment here at all. I go back to the office here in a week or so, and same thing. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah. We are looking at starting to go back, in a couple weeks, middle of June, and then through July and August, we'll be bringing everybody back into the office. And I just thought, I've got to go dust off my suits and like my ties and make sure that
that's right. You got to wear suits.
Yeah, I wear a suit and shirt and tie.
I forgot about that.
The ties and the shirts, fortunately, whenever I've had a meeting, I've had to wear a shirt and tie. So those, like, I know where those are, but like the pants I haven't had to wear. So I've been wearing shorts or whatever. Anyway, it'll be an adjustment to have to go back.
Yeah, you've got it worse than I do. I forgot about that.
Well, the good news is we are only going back. So I'll be back in the office 3 days out of the week, and 2 days I'll be at home. So it'll be really nice.
Yeah. Same deal here, which I love. I think that's great.
I think that's been one of the silver linings with all of this is a lot of places where normally it would have never been that kind of telecommute situation. This kind of forced us to have to work remotely and see, we can make this work. So it'll be exciting.
The flexibility is nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we have talked, the last time it was just the two of us, we talked about a very silly movie in Spaceballs.
Yeah. And I feel like,
I think this one might be right up there in terms of the silly level. It might even beat it.
Yeah, it's like you suggested this movie, and I know why you suggested it. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I almost feel like it was like, okay, Spaceballs was silly, huh? Okay, hold my beer. Let me show you silly here as we're talking about the movie Clifford, which I think came out in 1994.
94.
If you have HBO Max, you can watch it on HBO Max right now. It's part of the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival. So it was weird when I watched it. The guy comes up at the beginning and he like introduces it and starts talking about, I'm like, this is talking way too seriously about a not serious film. Like, it was just really funny because it's something that you would see at the beginning of a really classic movie. Like if they were, this is, Singing in the Rain, and this was monumental because of this and this and this. And it was like, the same kind of thing. Well, this is Clifford, and you really got to see Martin Short talking as a comedian, comedic actor, and all this other stuff. I'm like, wow, this guy has thought long and hard about this movie, way longer than anyone should.
He thought about it way longer than the filmmakers thought of this movie.
Yes, that's very true. And he talked about in there that like they started making the movie and then there were some troubles with the production, so it actually came out quite a bit later after it was made. But
They had some production issues, and then Orion Pictures, which was going to release it, had some financial issues. So this movie was actually shot in 1990 and was completed in 1991, but didn't hit theaters until 1994, and it bombed.
yeah,
But it's gained a kind of a cult following over the years. So we should describe the plot, because a lot of times we talk about movies that people are probably familiar with or have heard of. I'm not sure many people have watched or heard of Clifford.
I think that's probably pretty fair. He talked about how it's got this like big cult following now. And I'm like, does it though? Is there a really big? Maybe there is, and it's just not on
Surprisingly
my
so.
radar.
When I worked at the video store, it got some pretty good traction, and I would actually recommend it to people. I'm like, if you want something super silly, then this is, if you want a fun Friday night that you can just shut off your brain and enjoy, then this is kind of the movie for you.
Yeah. Okay, so the plot is basically
As it is.
Martin Short is playing Clifford, a 10-year-old boy. This is not super old. Martin Short was not 10 years old. He was 40 when they shot the film. So he's a 40-year-old playing a 10-year-old boy. Now, there are a few actors who can pull this off, and I do believe Martin Short is one of them, and we'll talk about his character and his performance in this. And he is obsessed with wanting to go to this place called Dinosaur World in Los Angeles. So he finds a way to get the airplane to land in Los Angeles that his parents and he are on as they're flying to Hawaii, gets stuck with his uncle Martin, played by Charles Grodin. And that's the reason we're talking about this, because he recently passed, and this is one that he has a pretty prominent role in, and he actually does a pretty good job in it. As much as I'm going to call this movie silly, I will talk about some of the positives, and I think that Charles Grodin is one of the positives, and I think Martin Short is one of the positives.
Absolutely.
And his uncle Martin is trying to show he likes kids to his fiance, and then Clifford is like the worst kid ever who wants to just go to Dinosaur World. And when that promise gets broken, then all hell breaks loose for Uncle Martin. That's basically the plot. And in the end,
we got a storybook though. We got a at the very beginning, Clifford is an adult in the year 2050, and he is a priest. He is a priest that visits the wayward school of boys, and he meets a young kid who ends up being played by Ben Savage, who you might remember Boy Meets World. There's a fair amount of famous people in this movie.
There are. What's funny about him, Ben Savage, being in this, at the minute he jumps out of the window and they show him like, oh, it's Corey Matthews from Boy Meets World. Well, what's weird is this came out in '94, which is the year after Boy Meets World came out, because it was shot in 1990. He looks quite a bit younger than he does in the first season of Boy Meets World, and so it was probably pretty weird to see that at the time.
Yes.
Like, wait a second. But yes, it is. It's Ben Savage, and yeah, he's a priest. I love, because it's in the future. It's in the year 2050. This is one of my favorite things that people do. So he's a priest, and to show that he's in the future, he's got like this red like edging on his priest clothing robes, and I just think they haven't changed like priest robes in like forever. Why by 2050 are they adding red to the edge of everything? Is it just to show that this is in the future? I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not Catholic myself. I'm not super familiar with everything that priests wear, so maybe they do wear something. But I just thought, no, that's just how they're showing that this is in the future. It's a futuristic priest robe.
Would not surprise me.
But yeah, so if that was in the year 2050, he was 10. And the movie kind of takes place maybe in the year 1990, so that's 60 years later. So he'd be 70, which I think is about the age that Martin Short is right now.
Yes, absolutely.
he looks better than he did in this movie.
I was going to say that is some really, really, really bad old age makeup on Martin Short.
It is, to me. Okay, so we talked about this before. We talked about the audience of the film, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you mentioned that it was probably for the Saturday Night Live crowd, and I think that that's part of this. When you look at his old person makeup, it is very much sketch comedy type old person makeup.
Yes, yeah, and I agree. I'm with you. It's not really a kids movie. I think it's kind of the stoner SNL crowd. I think they offered the script, and Martin Short probably thought it was really going to be fun to play a 10-year-old boy that's very mischievous and evil. And then he's friends with Charles Grodin, and Charles Grodin was probably like, sure, what the heck?
Yeah. It's hard to know why anyone, after reading this script, signed on for it, except, like you said, Martin Short, I think, probably looked at it and said, this is going to be fun. I'm going to have a good time doing this. And he did. Like, his performance out of everybody, you can tell he's having the most fun.
Oh my gosh, he is just this is actually one of my favorite Martin Short roles, just because he is so engaged in this film, and some of the physical comedy, the stuff that he does with his face. There's a great scene about halfway through. So Uncle Martin, played by Charles Grodin, and his girlfriend Mary Steenburgen, she doesn't want to marry him because she thinks that he doesn't want to have kids, and he doesn't.
Right.
He buys a one-bedroom bachelor pad on the side of a cliff. He's very not kid friendly. And Clifford, through acting out poorly on the airplane while his parents are traveling to Honolulu for a convention, forces the plane into LA. And it just so happens that Uncle Martin had just had a conversation with his girlfriend about how he didn't like kids. And then when his brother calls and says, hey, I need you to take Clifford for a week so I can go do this convention, it all just works out. It's just this most convenient plot point.
Yeah. The convenience of timing in this really pushes the boundaries of believability. Like, it's just and let's just talk about the trouble that he causes on the plane, because that makes it sound like he's just misbehaving. He goes up in the cockpit and turns the engines off because the captain says, oh no, the only way this plane is going to land in Los Angeles is if it's an emergency landing. Okay. Turns the engines off.
I was thinking to myself last night, I'm like, well, that wouldn't be happening if we shot it today. There's no way the kid is getting in the cockpit to mess with.
Oh no, yeah, they're not going to let him up there. I think it's funny because I love watching movies from the 80s, 90s, 70s where they're going to the airport and then involve the airport, because it is so different. And it reminds me of the times like when my dad would travel for business or my mom would travel for business, and we would go pick them up, and you'd walk all the way to the gate where they were coming in, and you'd wait at the gate and you'd watch the airplanes land and pull up to the gate. And it was a lot of fun. And now, like, that doesn't. I mean, you can't. You have to have a ticket to get past security, and
you could walk into the lobby area, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea of going up into the cockpit, like, they don't let anybody up there anymore. I mean, I think it was more common that if a kid was there, wanted to go up and see the captain, that they would make it happen. At least movies have told me that was common.
Yes.
And that may not be the case.
That's true, but who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, he I mean, and you get the sense of how wrong a kid he is as he's like, okay, time for liftoff. And he's got the dinosaur on the food tray. He keeps flipping the trays, and the lady in front of him gets all mad and yells at him, and his dad. Like,
Richard Kind. I forgot Richard Kind is in this movie as his dad.
I love it when he shows up, because he is another great comedic actor. He has a lot of these, smaller parts, but whenever he's in a show, he really brings a lot of comedy and a lot of talent to the role, and he just does a great job. I've enjoyed him whenever he pops up.
Yeah.
Because he just plays a great character every time, and he does a great job with this too. And the interaction between him and Martin Short as Clifford, like when he starts getting really angry and he's like, oh, dad's gonna have a stroke, or then he's gonna start talking like this and starts doing his stroke impression. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, that is one of the weirdest things about this movie, because honestly, if a 10-year-old kid does that, you're like, okay, that's inappropriate, but kind of funny because it's a 10-year-old kid. He doesn't understand why that's not okay to make fun of a stroke victim.
Right.
I don't know where the line is for a 40-year-old man playing a 10-year-old child doing that as well as he does. Like, I don't know. Is that funny, cute, inappropriate?
It's all the above, man.
Yeah. And he does it perfectly. And mom's like drunk and like drugged on the plane. I think she's taken the sleepy pills mixed with the alcohol, and she's just out of it.
She just doesn't want to deal with Clifford on a multi-hour plane ride.
Yeah, neither of them do. I don't know why they thought taking him on that plane was a good idea. I don't care that dad's speaking in Hawaii or whatever. Like, there's no way if I had a kid like Clifford, I'd be like, well, we got to get him on the plane. I mean, we got to take him with us. No, he's staying home or something.
You would give that kid Benadryl or something, you know?
Yeah, something to knock him out. Yeah, exactly.
Although knowing Clifford, I don't know if that would affect him. It
would probably have the opposite effect.
Bring him down. Yeah.
I think he has levels of immunity to things like that, I'm sure.
But I mean, it is so silly. So you have Martin Short, who is playing Clifford, who carries around a green plastic dinosaur named Stefan.
Yes, not Steven.
No,
yeah,
it is Stefan.
Yes.
And so I remember, so my mom, she wanted to see Blank Slate with Dana Carvey. And this is kind of why I think it might be in the SNL realm.
Sure.
It got 0 stars in the paper. And my mom was like, well, it still looks funny. And so we went and saw it, and it was for her birthday, and it was awful. And so then the following week, Clifford comes out, and it gets 0 stars in the paper. My mom had seen the commercials and thought, but I like Martin Short. I really like Charles Grodin. Let's go see it. And we were like, the other movie got 0 stars. And she was like, well, let's go. And so we did. And she ended up loving it. And she would watch this a lot on VHS. And so it was very nostalgic for me in a lot of ways. But I think one of the great scenes, and this shows you how surreal this movie is and how bizarre this movie is. So Clifford has landed the plane in Los Angeles. Uncle Martin has agreed to take him. Uncle Martin takes him to his girlfriend's house because the very first thing, it's like midnight.
Right.
The very first thing that he needs to do is to show his girlfriend that, see, my nephew's in town and see how much I love this little kid.
Right.
And so Martin Short jumps out of the car and goes running up to the front porch and doesn't walk up the path to the front door. He jumps over the railing to get in there, goes into the house, and Mary Steenburgen is in the shower.
Right.
And Clifford takes Stefan and puts him inside the shower curtain. She turns around and sees this dinosaur, not knowing the kid is coming, yells and freaks out, and he runs out. And Martin Short runs past Charles Grodin. He's like, don't judge me. It was Stefan's fault. And so then he goes, shame on you. Shame on your eyes. And that line just kills me every time.
Well, and that's the shtick for him. Everything that he does that's really bad, it's always Stefan that did it. It was always Stefan's plan. It was always when they crash not crash the plane, but when he turns the engines off, he's like, I don't know why Stefan did that, as they're, coming down, and I'm sorry, I don't know why Stefan did that. Like, it's always the dinosaur's fault. But yes, I love that scene.
That shame on your eyes.
Shame on your eyes. Yes.
It reminds me, because Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar came out recently, and I watched that, and I'm thinking to myself, this is like a Saturday Night Live sketch that never aired, that then they liked so much that they turned into a movie. Right. And I kind of feel like that's how this one kind of was. Like this it shouldn't work, and in a lot of ways it doesn't. Like I went to film school. There is nothing in this film that I would other than the performances that's redeeming, but the performances are so gonzo and so committed that
Yeah.
And I think it depends. If you like Martin Short and if you like Charles Grodin, then I think you'll probably enjoy this movie. But don't think that this is serious at all. This is absolutely not.
They know what they're making as they're making it, and they know that what makes it funny. Like, if you don't have Martin Short in the starring role in this movie, it does not work
Not at all.
It's not like you can plug in somebody else and say, okay, this movie's going to be just as good, because that literally, like you said, that's literally the only thing that's good about this movie. The story stinks. And it's one of those things where you're watching it and you're wondering how much of this was scripted, like how much of the lines that he's saying were in the script and the writers are just brilliant, and how much of it was Martin Short kind of improvising and, on the fly. Like when Charles, like, I feel like the scene where Charles Grodin like ruffles his hair and he's like, oh, wow, Uncle Martin, normally when someone ruffles my hair, I hate it. But when you do it, I love it. Like, was that like in that moment the director's like ruffle his hair, like show him how much, and like,
I think
Clifford, you look like you don't like it, and then Martin Short's like, I'm just gonna say that I don't like it, but I'm gonna say it the way that Clifford would say it. And like, I just feel like there's a lot of those lines that are just brilliant that came from Martin Short being like, I think this is what Clifford would do.
I think probably 80-90% of the Martin Short lines are completely just on the spot, off the top of the head. It seems more like it feels more like it was something that he would come up with than a writer trying to write in his voice would come up with. There's a scene with Dabney Coleman, and Dabney Coleman is one of my favorite underrated actors. Like, we do not talk about Dabney Coleman enough. And funny, Charles Grodin and Dabney Coleman were both in Muppet movies. So, we got that connection going. Anyway, there's a scene because Dabney Coleman plays his boss. Uncle Martin is a designer, and he had designed the main ride at Dinosaur World, the Larry the Scary Rex. And it's got a theme song and everything. And I'm not sure who that ride was made for.
I don't know either. Because when he goes on it, I'm like, what the world is this ride?
Because it's like this kid's ride that has a loop-de-loop and a dinosaur that tries to eat them. And I'm like,
Well, the ride itself, I'm pretty sure, number one, 95% of the budget went to making that ride for that shot on the ride. All of that was where all the budget for this movie went. That's why they didn't have any left over for his makeup later to show him looking so old. But the other thing is, even as the ride's going on, I'm like, this ride doesn't even have a very good plot as far as the ride goes. Like, when a T-Rex shows up and they're like, quick, use your laser. And then the laser gun pops out. I'm like, what is that? All of a sudden you got a laser on your... And I agree, like...
The villain is the hero of this ride. I mean, Larry the Scary Rex is a mean old dinosaur that's going to eat you unless you laser him. Yeah.
It's so weird. And like the ride, you and I are both theme park nuts. I mean, we enjoy Disney theme parks. We've, I think Lagoon places. I look at the ride vehicle. It looks like a little kid ride vehicle.
It totally does.
And the first part of the ride is just a simple dark ride. You're going through, you're seeing different dinosaurs. Then all of a sudden you've got skeletons popping out. One with looks like a tourist that died. He's got a t-shirt and a hat on and everything. And then the whole world falls apart. And like you said, loop to loops. I have no idea. It all of a sudden looked like Cannibal. It started out like, I mean, the only thing I can compare it to, and it doesn't even touch, is like Splash Mountain. If you've ever ridden Splash Mountain, it is a really long dark ride with the big incline splash at the end that you're not expecting, because the rest of it's just a leisurely boat ride through Song of the South.
Right.
And that's what this was just this nice little dark ride, and then goes crazy. It was weird.
And then I love how there's a major loop-de-loop in this, but he's only got a lap bar. There's no other restraint for him.
Yeah, there were a lot of issues with it, but it was a very bizarre ride. But yeah, the scene where the pterodactyls there is like, oh, things are starting to fall apart, like that, like the background and everything. I'm like, that's where all of the budget for this movie went.
Every bit of it. But I love the fact that Larry, when the T-Rex shows up, it's a screen projection of Larry. So I think that they got a little modeled T-Rex, or it almost looked like somebody in a suit.
Yeah.
I think they built a suit and filmed the guy, and then projected him huge on the wall behind for the effect. I think is what they did.
I think most of the budget went there. They didn't have a lot of some corner in the production there. So
yeah. But there's I think my favorite scene in the movie, and this is available on YouTube. So if you want to get a flavor for this movie without committing to this movie, it's on YouTube, and we can probably post a link. But there's a scene where Charles Grodin has embarrassed himself in front of his potential in-laws to be. He has gotten in trouble with the law due to Clifford. And so he is trying to get Clifford to admit what he's done, because Clifford is an angel to all these other people. He only slowly reveals himself when he chooses to. And there's this whole scene, and I think this section was very much improv, where Charles Grodin is standing and Martin Short is sitting, and he's trying to convince him that he needs to be repentant and he needs to explain what he has done. And there's a whole scene where he's like, just look at me. If you do anything weird, if you look at me weird, if you act weird, then there's going to be trouble. And then Martin Short just kind of makes this weird face at him. And then he's like, just act like a normal human boy. You can't even do that for a minute, can you? And Martin Short, for about 20 seconds, does a variety of faces that just kill me just because it is so silly. And Charles Grodin, I'm like, how does he not break character? Because Charles Grodin is like, see, you can't do it. He's completely deadpan. And I just, that scene is just very representative of this movie.
Yeah, and Charles Grodin really, we talk about Martin Short being great as a 10-year-old kid, and I really don't know of a lot of actors that could pull it off as well as Martin Short did. I mean, it is rarefied air, and it does take a talent, as weird and bizarre as the movie is. But Charles Grodin playing the straight man role in this does it so well, and I don't know that anybody could have done it better, because number one, Charles Grodin, like, they call it RBF. It really should be RGF, resting Grodin face, because the way he just looks utterly disgusted all the time is amazing. And it's not
even when he's trying to look excited.
Yes. Yeah. He just always has, I mean, and it's that ability to just look unimpressed or disgusted that just makes him great for this role, because he can play that over and over again. And, you know, you see it like in his small role in So I Married an Axe Murderer, where the guy tries to commandeer the vehicle. He's like, nah. I mean, just the faces that he does, even in that moment, are great. And so he does a great job in this film. And I honestly think that the relationship between the two of them is really what does work in this film more than anything else. And it does suck you in. Like, you definitely feel bad for Uncle Martin at the end. And it's very similar, in my opinion, to Dr. Leonard Marvin in What About Bob, where he's strapping the bomb to Bob, and you're like, yeah, I don't blame him. Bob is awful. He is ruining his life. And like, Charles Grodin taking him to the park, and he's going to make him ride the ride for like 100 hours straight or whatever, and he's just going to torture him at this theme park that he's wanted to go to. I'm like, yeah, I don't blame him. The kid's awful. Like, I'd kill him.
I should not put this ride into overdrive. Oops. And then, like, I love this scene too, because he puts it into hyperdrive, and and everything malfunctions. And so the dinosaur car is getting ready to fall into the dinosaur's mouth. You know, Larry the Scary Rex has fallen down. He's got his mouth open. The car is going to be crushed. And Martin Short is hanging by his seatbelt, which instead of a lap bar, which is really funny. He's hanging there, and he's like, help me, Uncle Martin, help me. And Charles Grodin, like, just stands there.
Yeah.
And there's like, the camera just lingers on him for like 4 or 5 seconds. He's like, I'm thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, you know what? I don't blame you.
I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, let him fall. Let him go. Like, you really do, because of his performance, like, you really do feel bad for the guy, because you can tell, I mean, he's just trying.
He's not the greatest guy, but he's not a bad guy.
No, he's not a bad guy. like it's one of those things where they position him as kind of this bad-ish guy in the beginning because he doesn't want to have kids and whatever. But like, that's just making different life choices than I've made. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you've got different priorities. Now, it might make you a bad fit for a relationship with somebody who does want to have kids. But again, you're not a bad guy. But like, and his motives for taking Clifford in obviously weren't great, because just showing off to your significant other that you love kids, but not actually loving the kid, it's not going to work out well for you. But not to the he didn't deserve the extreme not working out that he got.
Oh, the other scene that I think is just bizarre and hilarious. So Clifford gets picked up by Uncle Martin at like 10 o'clock at night, and Clifford has stolen a bunch of stuff off of the baggage claim, including a dog and a surfboard and some kind of kitchen appliance. And Charles Grodin's like, boy, your dad brings a lot of stuff. He's like, oh yes, he's very afraid of burglars. So anyway, after they visit Mary Steenburgen's house, and now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and yet in the next scene, while Clifford's getting ready for bed, he's got like a donut and a giant Big Gulp from 7-Eleven. So they stopped off at somewhere about 1:30 in the morning to get treats and sugar for this little kid.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about the fact that there was a dog. You see it in that scene, and then the dog never gets mentioned again. This dog is now just... What's that?
Same with Clifford's parents.
Yeah, they're gone.
The plot's done with them, so they're out of the movie.
Yeah. Like, we just needed his parents to be on the plane and still want to go to Hawaii, so we have a reason for him to stay with Uncle Martin. But then after that, we don't really care about the parents.
Right.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. I do love the scene with all the stuff that he steals from the baggage claim, because
like, how did this 10-year-old kid pull all this stuff off the baggage claim and nobody notices?
Well, and then it makes you think, well, obviously that's where he got the Walkman, because I love when he's sitting there listening to his dad's like, did you steal this? No, a priest gave it to me. Yes, because priests are often walking around the airport with Walkman that they just give out to kids. Look like a nice boy. Here's a Walkman.
It's a delivery. It's the delivery of that line. And again, it goes back to the performance. On paper, that line's got to be silly and stupid. And in the hands of a lesser comedic actor, it's just going to fall flat.
Yeah.
But for some reason, especially, and the thing that I love too is often when Clifford lies, he gives kind of this evil, almost looks down the barrel of the camera, like not quite, but very close. And he just kind of gives this side eye look like, oh yeah, you know how bad I am.
Yeah. But I do love the Big Gulp of the donut. Like, why would you stop off at 7-Eleven at that point? And why would that be what you buy the kid? I mean, well, and what I love too is he's watching some National Geographic documentary about the tribes in Africa, because I think every kid went through that phase of like
10-year-old boy in our timeline.
Yeah,
that was our first exposure to the female form in a lot of ways.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Charles Grodin is like, just looks at him like, what are you watching?
Yeah.
He turns the channel off, and then again blaming it on Stefan. No, he looks at Stefan. He's like, what's that? Oh, Stefan thinks that was a very cruel thing.
Yes. Not like, how could you turn it? A very cruel thing to do. Everything is so over dramatic, and I love that the way that they make that work. So in the scene in the very beginning, when he's talking to Ben Savage's character, and he's like, so what's your IQ? And the kid's like, oh, it's 185. He's like, yeah, mine was 190, or is 190. And then the kid's like, oh, you know what? I forgot it's 195. And he's like, oh, well, mine's actually really close to 200, but it doesn't really matter. Like, he's establishing that he's very intelligent and like this genius level. And that's why he's able to pull all this stuff off. That's the plausibility of the film, is that he's just this super genius.
Right.
They mention it like for 2 seconds at the beginning, and it's almost like Like, we've got to find a reason to explain how he's able to pull all this stuff off. Oh, we'll just say in the beginning that he's a genius. Okay, well, that'll fix it.
He's got to be a genius because he's got to take the Walkman and Uncle Martin's answering machine and put the two together so that he can make a bomb threat.
Yes,
against City Hall. He's got to be a genius because he starts playing with the computer board at the boss's office. And then knows how to seal the cassette tape. I love that too, that the presentation's on one of those old cassette.
Yes.
Not even a hard drive or a thumb drive, or it's a big cassette. But he also knows how to sabotage and cause the whole thing to blow up to make Uncle Martin look bad at his big presentation. So.
And that is the breaking moment. Right. I mean, he is on the verge of being broken at that moment. When he shows up to the presentation, he's completely unshaven. His boss says, you look like crap, as he's wearing this fake ponytail, which also looked like crap. And he gets up there, and then when everything blows up and they zoom in on his face, like, it is so perfect. He looks just utterly like, yep,
this is my life now.
It's over. The kid's going to die. Like,
Dabney
I've made a decision.
Dabney Coleman looks at him. He's like, who's responsible for this? He's like, I am. You know, he's just accepting his fate. Like, this is
you're fired. Yep. Yep. Time to take Clifford to the dinosaur world park. Throw him into the dinosaur.
Oh, Jake, the other scene, talk about the physical comedy. So Mary Steenburgen and Dabney Coleman end up going to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to keep Charles Grodin out of the picture, Dabney Coleman, as his boss, has assigned him to redesign the entire public transport system of Los Angeles in 2 days before the big presentation. So that's going to keep, Uncle Martin busy. So Dabney Coleman and Mary Steenburgen go to San Francisco, and Clifford tricks Uncle Martin on getting on the train and traveling up to San Francisco so that he can go to Dinosaur World, because he wants Uncle Martin out of the picture for a weekend.
Right.
And that scene where Clifford is slowly walking on the train as it's leaving. The train is pulling out. Charles Grodin, somehow, again, without a ticket, very much like the airport,
just gets on the train.
And Martin Short just starts quietly humming this little song, and then he's walking, and he starts walking a little faster, and the song gets a little bit louder, and then at the end he's thrown his arms completely out, and he's like, oh! Like, I have finally achieved what I want. I'm so happy. I can't contain it.
Yeah. He does. And he's so, like, all of his plans, obviously, I love the mischievousness of it. You can see how he does it. I love when Uncle Martin comes to pick him up, and he's got the sign that says, I love my Uncle Martin, and he's asleep with the marker in his hand. But even more when they're in San Francisco, and he throws this big party because he's like, yeah, you can come and do this party at our house if you'll take me to Dinosaur World tomorrow. And like, yeah, I don't care. I'll take you to Dinosaur World, whatever.
He goes and finds all these hoodlum teens.
Yes, and they have this just huge party at his house. And then when Uncle Martin finally gets back, he's tied himself up in the room, and he's like, oh, Uncle Martin, I'm so glad you made it home safely. I couldn't stop them. And so he's just like, well, he's tied up. So he just nails the doors shut and the windows so he can't get out.
I love, but the line, and again, this is the performance, and I think this line is improv, and again, that's what makes it so funny. Is he's like, they tied me up and they told me stories, and some of them are fun, but some of them were scary. It's just vintage Martin Short, and then he's like, and then they tried to touch my no-no place.
Yes,
like, all right, your no-no place.
Yeah,
it's just so over the top and silly,
and he does a good job of doing that, mixing in like this over the top way that a 10-year-old would never talk, super refined, like oh yes, sweetest mother who gave birth to me and whatever. Like 10-year-olds don't talk like that. But then he mixes in things like no parts that a 10-year-old would say, you know. It's really, really, like, Martin Short is an incredibly talented actor, and I don't think people understand how good he is
Yes.
all the time, because I think he's a big name. I think people know who Martin Short is,
Right.
but they often rope him into movies and things that he's done, like with Steve Martin, or they don't always recognize how great a talent he is just on his own. And I think this
Right.
film really kind of demonstrates how funny he can be, because the film itself, like we've mentioned, is a dumpster fire, but what saves it is the fact that he is really, really funny as Clifford.
Well, and this is just a couple of years after the Three Amigos, which was a second film, which is crazy to think about because Three Amigos is a total cult classic. This is a minor cult classic, but he's so good in Three Amigos. Like when he's talking about what he'd do with the money, and Steve Martin and Chevy Chase are like, "I'm going to buy a car, a big giant car," and Chevy Chase wants to do something with his money, and then Martin Short's like, I would open up a village for young children, and I would, educate the homeless. And I'm with you. Martin Short he's not only funny, he's a really good actor. And he started off in the SCTV, which was kind of like the Saturday Night Live of Canadian television. Did improv with I think he was with the Groundlings. I could be wrong about that, but he's got kind of that sketch comedy improv ability. And I think he's a known name, but I don't think people really appreciate what he is able of doing. It's kind of like when we were talking about My Blue Heaven and Spaceballs. Rick Moranis sometimes doesn't get the credit that he's due. Like, people know him, but they don't really appreciate his talent. And I think it's the same with both Charles Grodin and with Martin Short in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. And Rick Moranis, another SCTV alum.
Yes.
And
yeah,
I mean, really, like, if you're into some of that screwball sketch comedy that's a little bit off the wall, like, I think everybody's really familiar with old Saturday Night Live, and Bill Murray got his start there, Chevy Chase, those kind of actors. Steve Martin was on Saturday Night Live. You've got to go check out SCTV, because you've got Martin Short on there, you've got Rick Moranis, John Candy, some really big names that came out of there. Eugene Levy got his start on SCTV.
That's
Dave
right.
Thomas was on. I mean, there are some really, really funny people. Kate O'Hare, like, really, really funny, talented people. And you've got to go back and watch some of this SCTV stuff, because it is off the wall. It is screwy. But it's really, really funny. And you can see some of these really talented people. And they all went on to have big careers doing comedy.
Yeah.
That I think went for a long time being underappreciated. Like, I think now, like Eugene Levy and getting kind of the recognition due with like Schitt's Creek
right.
And things like that, where before he wasn't always recognized as this really great comedic actor. Like, he was a guy who popped up in funny movies and was really good, but you wouldn't necessarily think of him all the time. But
we should do some of his movies. We haven't talked much about Eugene Levy. I can't think of the other actor's name who actually did, like, Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show.
Yeah.
Christopher Guest. We should do some Christopher Guest stuff too, because it's that same kind of funny comedic actor who's actually an actor who can actually pull off the stuff. There's no dramatic moments in Clifford that Martin Short can really show off his dramatic range, but sometimes being funny is harder than being serious.
Yeah.
And he is just so committed to this role. And I had some friends, I posted on Facebook last night that I was rewatching it. And I had a couple of friends that were like, oh my gosh, I remember this movie. And then I had a couple of people who were like, yeah, I watched it again when I was an adult. And, I saw it when I was a kid, watched it when I was an adult, and went, this is awful. But I think you've got to know what you're getting into when you go to see this movie. It is just screwball silly. It is Martin Short off the wall. It is just something that you cannot take seriously at all. And I was just giggling, and I'm like, you know what? After a long week, this is kind of exactly what I wanted to unwind at the end of the week.
Yeah, I agree. Like, objectively, the film is bad. It's
It's a
really,
bad
really
movie.
bad movie. But you have to watch it and appreciate what Martin Short does, because I think you're right. Being a comedic actor in a role like this and being able to commit yourself and be good at it at the same time is really, really hard.
Because that character could have gotten, I mean, he's annoying. Clifford is annoying, and you do want to kill him, but yet you're still laughing at Clifford.
Yeah.
And that is a fine line to walk, because it could have been like, this kid is, well, and we talked about this off air. Do you want to share the story of your wife's reaction?
Yeah. So my wife does not like stories, movies. She especially doesn't like it in real life, where someone is a jerk the whole time and then there's like no consequences for them whatsoever. And that's exactly what happens in this movie. She just did not appreciate the fact that Clifford was a jerk and didn't get what was coming to him. Like,
right.
He got off scot-free basically. And like, she struggled with that. And I can see that, because
I can totally see that.
And this movie's full of that too, because even the boss is an awful person. But this is the early 90s, where a white man trying to basically force himself on a woman that he's rich, so he's gonna get away with that, which was awful.
Oh, the scene in San Francisco where Mary Steenburgen is like, you're a phony, Martin, and I can spot a phony a mile away. And then two people in drag come up, and this guy in a really low voice is like, hey, do you know where some location is? And she's like, no, ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't. I'm like, it made me laugh, but at the same time, I felt bad about laughing, because I'm like, that is not something in today's atmosphere that you could ever do. Dabney Coleman forcing himself on Mary Steenburgen and then going, if you think this innocent high school girl act is turning me off, well, you're wrong.
And it goes again, and like, that was not my favorite scene, and it was bad, and it probably would not be in a movie today, except if it was like trying to be overly offensive, but
like a South Park type of thing. Yeah.
But again, there's no consequences for him. And so
nope.
If you're into movies where you see somebody and they get what's coming to them, this is not the right movie for you, because
this is not the redemption arc. Yeah, this is not
like, there's nothing in this movie that tells me why he ends up becoming a priest. No, and like realizing the error of his ways.
Well, there's that moment after he's almost eaten by the dinosaur where he's like, I'm sorry, and Martin, Uncle Martin is saying, are you really? He's like, no, I really am. And that's supposed to be the scary moment that caused him to completely change his life. But again, it's so much of this plot, it's just thrown in there and mentioned and never come back to.
It's like, oh, maybe we do need this part, so let's just throw this line in to like justify it. Because really, like, throughout the whole thing, there's no remorse. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And like, normally, if you have a movie where it starts out with, now I'm a priest and I take care of this boys' school, and but I was a really bad kid, you're going to get the story of like seeing him transform and grow over time. And there's none of that in this. Like, it goes from bad to worse to worse. And then, like you said, you get that one line where it's like, I really am sorry. Ta-da. Okay, but I'm not buying it either. Like, I'm with Uncle Martin. Like, I don't think you're really that sorry, kid. But he did write him 287 letters.
When your childhood idol almost eats you, it strikes a chord with you. It makes a difference.
Who would that have been for me? My childhood idol. It probably, at that age, probably would have been the mailman, Karl Malone. Eat me like a hearty sandwich. That's what would have been. Karl Malone, eat me like a hearty sandwich. That would have turned me around.
Oh, the hearty sandwich reference. Well done, sir. Well done. Bravo for that one. That's beautiful.
Well, we do have to give this movie a grade, because that's what we do on the show. And I'm going to start with you, Tracy, because I'm not sure where I'm going to go with my grade on this yet.
So if you're in the right mood, if you acknowledge the film is what it is. And if you can, oftentimes, like, we have superhero movies where you have to just kind of accept that there are people in this world who are able to fly and shoot laser beams out of their eyes. You have to kind of just believe that this 40-year-old Martin Short is a 10-year-old boy. And it's very 90s. It's very early 90s. It's late 80s, early 90s. It's got some really famous people. The performances are gonzo and over the top. And maybe it's because it was nostalgia seeing this and reminding me of my mom. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a B+. It is not a good movie, but the performances in this movie are just so silly, and they're so committed to them that it made me laugh really hard last night while I was unwinding. I hadn't watched this movie for 20 years, and it's just it's like I said, it's not a good movie, but it's entertaining. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a B+.
All right. And you said it was nostalgic because it reminded you of your mom. And so
I'm wearing the nostalgia glasses. I am completely admitting that here.
I know, but the part where it reminded you of your mom is the part where I'm like, okay, now I don't want to be overly harsh, because I do think if you want to see the range of Martin Short, especially in the early part of his film career, as he's kind of just coming on the stage, you've got to see Clifford, and you've got to see his performance, because it is really incredible. Because yes, you do have to kind of turn off that believability part that, okay, this is a 40-year-old man playing a 10-year-old boy, and I've just got to accept that. But Martin Short makes it easy to accept it. He plays the role really well. As he's getting in the dinosaur to ride the ride that he's finally there at Dinosaur World, and he gets to ride it, and his excitement, like, it looks like a 10-year-old child. Yeah, like, he does have these moments where you're like, I can believe that he's a 10-year-old kid. And Charles Grodin is the perfect straight man to Clifford's off the wall, evil child character.
Yeah. You give that kid a pan of sugar and
yeah. Like,
well, and
Charles
Grodin calls him Hitler a couple times.
Yeah. But I feel like this film doesn't have an audience. I feel like this film doesn't have a direction. It doesn't have a story. I mean, it does. It gets you from point A to point B, but it just kind of does it in a really not great way. There's plenty of plot holes. There's plenty of issues. For me, the performances aren't enough to get this up above a C- for me.
Okay.
Like, I do think you need to see Martin Short in this film, because you've got to see how great he is in it, and Charles Grodin as well. But the film's just bad.
It's a bad movie. I'll completely admit that. My wife, who watched it last night, she had never seen it. She ended up giving it a B. She was like, it's a terrible movie, but it was funny. And maybe it was because I was laughing, and so that kind of influenced her.
Yeah.
But, you got to be in the mood for just a completely silly movie. If you're in the mood for something serious or good, this is not going to go well for you. Yeah.
It's true, though. Watching a comedy with Tracy, like, it is much funnier, because if Tracy's laughing, it's just this infectious laugh that you're like, yeah, this is hilarious. I don't know why, but I'm going for it. It's funny.
It's like when we viewed Shazam.
Yes.
I don't even remember what scene it was, but I'm giggling about something, and this 10-year-old boy next to us turns around and looks at us and goes, that wasn't funny. And that just made me laugh harder.
Yeah. Like, well, maybe you didn't think so, but we did. And so there.
You don't know, kid.
Memories. Boy, the good old days when you'd go to a theater and there were people there.
Oh, by the way, real quick, I ventured out to the theater and checked out A Quiet Place 2.
What did you think?
It's not quite as good as the original, but it's still really tense. And I got to tell you, you called it when the first movie came out. The young actress, and I'm blanking on her name, but the young deaf actress, Millie, steals this movie. Like, she is so good in the sequel. Have you watched it yet?
I haven't seen the sequel yet.
She's phenomenal.
I have 3 kids who want me to take them to go see it, so we may go see it at some point.
Yeah. But it was nice being back in the theater and seeing it on the big screen. And I'm like, we saw a preview for Top Gun, and I'm like, that's another movie that I've got to see on the big screen.
Yeah.
So it's nice that we're kind of getting back into it. Hopefully we can get into some screening soon.
Yeah, I agree. And there's some big ones coming out. Black Widow's coming out soon. Dune is coming out soon. That you do just have to go see on the big screen. And we are getting to the point here locally, at least, where a lot of the capacity restrictions are also being lifted. And like, I want it to be safe. And I feel like we're getting to a point where it is. And I feel like I've done everything I can to be safe. You've got to decide for yourself what is and isn't. And I'm not going to dictate that for you. But
I hope for a little while still they'll keep the 1 seat barrier in between people.
Well, I just hope that, generally speaking, I don't like sitting right next to people I don't know anyway.
But I mean, I took my dad and we ended up having the whole row to ourselves. So it worked out great.
Yeah. But there's just something like I've gone to a couple of movies a few months ago. I haven't gone for a while. And the theaters were really not full at all. And there's just something different about seeing a movie for the first time on the big screen in a full theater. Like
the lights come down and
there are just moments like I can't imagine seeing Endgame just at home, not in the theater. Like the moment when, spoilers, Cap gets the hammer, like that moment and the cheering that happened.
Yeah, even thinking about crazy. It gives me goosebumps. Yeah, that was one of my favorite because we saw it in a screening beforehand, and we were with some critics, and it was very empty theater. But then we went and watched it again in a packed theater with people who were seeing this for the first time, and the energy was completely different.
Yeah, it was. But I will say what was neat though, in the screening with all of the critics, these are people that they watch movies for a living and they're very jaded to a lot of the stuff that happens in movies. But that scene still got everybody up off their feet. And it was incredible, even in that small group, to see that. And so
these hardened film critics are like, yes.
So
we've got another fun movie coming up next week. Now, this coming up, I have not viewed either one of these films. We're going to talk Paddington 2.
Yes.
I've never seen either one. I have heard great things, and I love the Paddington stories as a kid. It's just one that I never got around to watching. I've heard it is sublime, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Paddington 2, and then we're going to talk about Citizen Kane. And if you don't know why we're talking about these two films back to back, basically what happened is Citizen Kane had a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and had more reviews from critics than anything else. So it was the #1 rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes. Right. And it is a classic that is considered by many people to be the greatest film of all time. Yeah. And so it's like the argument is definitely there. But what happened is they found a review from like the 40s where somebody didn't like it and gave it a negative review. And so because it dropped from being 100% positive, the new king of the heap was Paddington 2, because it was 100% and it had more reviews than anything else. And so that's why we're going to talk about them back to back. But an interesting thing happened. I don't know if you saw this, Tracy, last week. They found a negative review of Paddington 2.
I think it was Orson Welles from the other side.
Yes, I think so. He penned it from the other side.
Injustice will not stand. I will use all of my otherworldly powers
to make this not be the case. But I want to, when we talk about Paddington 2, talk about this review from this critic, because to me, the review itself embodies toxic fandom, and we'll talk about that and the toxicity of fandom out there. But these are two movies that are very, very different, but critics seem to love both of them, and we're going to review them back to back. So next week is going to be just you and me again talking about Paddington 2, but then Val will be back for Citizen Kane, because we need all three of us for that movie.
And then when we're all back together too, Staff Picks is coming back. So we haven't done Staff Picks for a while. Staff Picks will be coming back as well.
Normally our first one of the month would be Staff Picks. We're putting it off because we want to do that one together
we can't
in
do
person.
Staff Picks without Val, because she's part of the staff. You need everybody in the staff participating, or it doesn't work.
And honestly, I think for any of us, it doesn't do justice to just say, here are my picks, and then us read them on the air, because I need Val to explain to me what her picks are. I need you to explain to me what your picks are, because that changes my view entirely when someone says, these are my 3 picks and this is why I picked it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's an interesting outlook. Now I need to go see that movie with that perspective. And so we need all 3 of us here for that.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Exciting stuff coming up. Make sure you follow us on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook. We probably ought to get a TikTok put together, Tracy, and do some of those fun, like, bikini ones. I'll put on baggy clothes and then show myself in a bikini.
Clicks are going to go through the roof, man.
Yeah, it'll drive everybody to listen to our podcast.
I've got a niece who wants to be an actress, and over quarantine, she started a TikTok stream. She has over 1 million followers now.
Wow.
And she has legit landed a full feature movie role. She's not the star, but she's got a fairly prominent role that she gets to go film later this year. So, dreams can come true. You and I, man, we'll defy the odds because we're not the demographic, but we'll figure out a way.
We'll figure out a way to do it. Yeah. Anyway, follow us in all the places. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. We've gotten up in subscribers. We've gained like 20 subscribers over the last few weeks. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Make sure you like our videos there and leave comments. That drives other people there as well. So
let us know what films you want us to talk about.
Absolutely. We've gotten some good fan suggestions for some episodes that we may look at doing here in the near future. But yeah, all exciting stuff. We love your feedback. Leave reviews on Facebook, leave reviews on our podcast, leave reviews, anywhere that you can, as long as they're positive reviews. You can leave negative ones too. We just
send the negative reviews to info@moviesthatmakeus.com.
Yeah.
I mean, don't post those online where everybody can see them. Just send them to us directly.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. All right. Well, we appreciate you watching. Thanks so much. And for the time being still, we won't see you at the movies.
Larry, the scary Rex. He's a scary dinosaur with big sharp teeth and a loud.
This has been a Stolen Droids Media production.